Now, behind me is the 401, the busiest highway in all of Canada. Although due to the pandemic and the current lockdown here in Ontario, it's not quite as busy as it normally would be, especially on the long weekends. It can get really crazy. Now, for a thought experiment, suppose it was a long weekend and you had 100 people lined up on this side of the highway, all blindfolded. And then at the count of 3, they were all forced to make a mad dash to the other side. Obviously, most wouldn't make it. Most would get hit. But there would be a few survivors, and those few who did survive, well, they'd feel pretty lucky. Some might, in fact, attribute their survival to a divine miracle. But would that really be the case? Wouldn't the more rational explanation simply be that, well, someone had to get across to the other side, and they just happened to be one of the lucky ones? Now, several years ago, I was with a church group in New York City. We were taking the subway, and we were situated towards the end of the train, facing one of the doors. And when we came to one particular stop, there was a German family. And while the daughter, I think she was about 12, while she got onto the train, for whatever reason, her parents had become distracted, so that when they eventually looked up to get on the train themselves, the doors closed right in front of them, and I will never forget the look of sheer horror on that poor mother's face. So quite naturally, we stayed with that young girl, and we got off with her at the next stop, assuming that her parents would hop on the next train and hopefully stop there as well. And sure enough, several minutes later, a train approached. Now, we were towards the end of the platform, so the majority of the train just zipped past us before it stopped. It was impossible. As much as we tried to look in the windows to find her parents, everything was just a blur. But when the train stopped and the doors opened, lo and behold, right in front of us were her parents. It was a miracle. Or was it? Over the following hours, I realized that assuming that all the trains on that line had the same amount of carriages, and assuming that her parents hadn't moved when we pulled away from them, then when they got on the next train, they would have got on the same carriage, entered the same doorway relative to ours, so that when the train stopped, well, obviously there we were, eyeball to eyeball. It wasn't a miracle at all. Now, please, please, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that God can't intervene in our natural world today, that He's not all-knowing, that He's not sovereign. Of course He is. God can do whatever He wants. All that I'm saying is that we should be a little bit more careful, a little more cautious, a little more humble, and not be so quick to attribute every random event and coincidence in our lives as though it's an act of the divine. I know of believers who will spend a lot of time connecting all kinds of random dots in their lives and then declare that it's a sign from God. I've heard preachers say right from the pulpit that Christians don't believe in coincidences. Everything happens for a reason. Really? Are you sure about that? Because our lives, our daily lives, are filled with many random events and coincidences. That young woman who you pulled up beside at the stoplight this morning on your way to work, well, that only happened because you spent an extra 20 seconds this morning cleaning up some dry dog food before you left the house. And for her, it was because her coffee order got mixed up. And the reason why it got mixed up was her server was flustered because his manager yelled at him. And the reason why his manager yelled at him was because 3 of her employees had just called in sick and she was completely stressed. Life is filled with random events and coincidences. And we need to be so very careful not to be so quick to attribute them to acts of God. Because not only does that discredit God in the eyes of non-believers who are already skeptical enough, but it can also undermine the faith of fellow believers, especially young believers, who, if they've been raised on this idea to see random events as divine acts of God, well, when they begin to realize that no, they are just random acts, well, they can begin to doubt everything that they have been taught by about the Christian faith. And that's not good. To subscribe, click on the icon here, and to watch more of my videos, click on the end cards over here. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I do appreciate it. Please tell others if you enjoyed it. And I hope to see all of you next Thursday. Bye for now, and God bless.